Part of the purpose of these trips to LA is to check in on our customers, check in on some of our collaborators, people that we're doing projects with, but it's also about meeting composers to talk to them about the current state of play, because we're not always totally synchronized the way that things are kind of playing out in Britain and Europe and the way that things are playing out in America. And there is, obviously, in LA, there's a real pilgrimage to here. It's kind of our mecca, if you will. And I think it's always good for me to get a sense of what the scene is like out here for composers who are thinking of coming out. And for us, with Spitfire, to keep our finger on the pulse regarding providing tools that are of use to people who are really working in the thick of it. So I'm going to go and meet Nathan BARR. Now, linked below is a Cribs film that we made with him with Spitfire, and hopefully he's agreed to let me have a rifle around his facility, but also to have a little bit of chat with him with the current state of play with stuff in LA. So, got my cameras, got my microphone. Let's hit the road. So it's my great pleasure to be meeting up with Nathan for the first time. How are you doing, sir? You're all right. Thanks so much for having us. And we're doing a photo shoot for this new thing that Lauren's organising. But I thought I'd steal a little peek around your studio.
Absolutely, okay. I'd love to show you.
Yeah, so should we start with that?
Yeah, you want to start?
I heard a big noise coming out of there.
Yeah. So this is this whole building was essentially built around the 20th Century Fox Studios Warminster Theatre organ.
Okay.
So back in the 20s, all the studios had theatre organs. Warner Brothers had one, Fox had one, Paramount had one, Universal had one, and so this is really the only one left. And this entire room, the 5 rooms behind that wall, the room outside, all house the organ. And this was really about maximizing the space for the organ. And in the process of doing that, we got a spectacular sounding scoring stage, because obviously a pipe organ reflects the entire totality of frequencies as far as an orchestra goes. You've got super low bass ends, you've got the super high pipes, and so if you get it right for a theater organ, you're going to get it right for an orchestra too. So this is a piece my friend Mark Herman played that you'll recognize.
Those bloody Newmans get everywhere, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They do, and so that's the organ you hear in The Sound of Music, and
that's insane.
Alex North, Dimitri Tiomkin, John Williams, everyone between 28 and 98 who needed an organ and were doing a score at Fox used this organ. So it wasn't used a lot, but a couple times a year it was used, and it's just got John Williams used it in Get Empire of the Sun, Home Alone, which is of Eastwick. Jerry Goldsmith used it maybe more than anyone else in Patton and The Omen 2 and all sorts of stuff. So it's a really special piece of film music history. And in its first year back here, I used it in a film, House of the Clock on Its Walls. Danny Elfman used it in The Grinch. The Danas just used it in the upcoming Addams Family film. Teddy Shapiro just used it in a film. I'm really keen to let people get in here and put it back into Hollywood where it belongs. Yeah.
And you record in bands here as well?
Yeah, I mean we've done the biggest. We could do a 50 piece in here. We've done. I just recorded a score for a film I did at Universal a couple weeks ago called The Hunt, which we had a 40-piece string ensemble, and then we did 6 French horns later. We've had like 42 in here, so we've never done 50 yet, but we'll get there I think this year. So yeah.
And some amazing bits of kit.
Yeah.
Is a harmonium?
No, so this is something that I developed over the course of multiple years with my friend Mark Herman. So we basically took an old pump organ, completely gutted it, and then we put in a custom set of stops. So when I just pulled that out, incito, which is Latin for to arouse, that turns on a wind machine back in the walls there, which sends wind into here, and then I can sort of put up whatever pipes I want to really sort of experiment, which I did. You can do all sorts of cool things with it. And then this turns on a second blower, which goes in phase through that, so everything gets overblown then and turns very loud and crazy sounding.
That's amazing.
And then these are also going to activate some other very strange instruments from the early 1900s that are currently being restored. So
amazing.
Yeah.
Stunning.
And then these are shaker chimes, which are pretty rare. This particular set is from 1901. It is A440. These started being manufactured around 1890 in Chicago, and before these, they were not A440. So the tuning process is quite dangerous because you're actually shaving metal off. And I know a guy who was tuning them in his shop caught on fire. So yeah, they're really beautiful. Sound.
Absolutely beautiful. Never seen those before.
So this piano is a part of the Wurlitzer. So most people don't know that theater organs include a lot of instruments that are not pipe related. So Fox did not originally have a piano in its installation on the scoring stage. I added this. This is from the Portland Paramount. It's got a series of solenoids here, which allow one to trigger this from the console. So if you're playing the organ and you want to add piano, you just hit a stop, boom, the piano's at your fingertips.
That's insane.
So yeah, it's pretty cool in that it's got this really cool feature. You see this rail here, it's called a mandolin rail. It turns it into a tack piano. And that's also triggerable from the console, so you can actually access that during a performance as well. So when you cross this threshold here, you're standing in the pipe organ.
Wow.
So this entire structure is floating free of the building, and the two rooms down here house the mechanical components.
Lord.
This is where all the wind gets routed. We're standing under like 800 pipes, 900 pipes right now. And this is basically, you get a single column of wind, and it needs to be divided up, pressurized, and then sent to the right set of pipes above us. So this is all original, the box. We didn't even resand it. It was just in such good condition.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And what's the kind of maintenance like on this?
It's pretty, I really took the time to make sure it was restored properly, and it was restored by one of the great restorers.
Right.
So as long as it's temperature, humidity controlled and restored well, then you don't need to worry about a lot of maintenance issues that usually pop up. So it gets tuned every 2 months.
Right.
It's maybe 2 hours of tuning. So it's really not bad.
Oh my God, it's just crazy.
Yeah, so this is all the original, again, pipe work. Every pipe was cleaned, but just, you're walking into a musical instrument.
Yeah.
Everything you see was part of the organ. This was all manufactured by Wurlitzer in upstate New York, North Tonawanda. And the craftsmanship is just immaculate. All this hand soldering, you just don't see this anymore these days. You can fire these off locally when you're adjusting. So there are a lot of, basically each one of these sets of pipes represents a color in the orchestra. So if you get up here, you can kind of start to see some of the smaller higher pitch pipes.
Tiny.
They are. So this is a flute rank. And obviously once you get to the highest pitches, you can no longer do much with wood. So they all become sort of very similar in a way. And this is one of the highest pitches in the organ. This is really a dog whistle high.
I can still hear that frequency.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. And then if I fire this off, this is diapason, which is sort of the mother rank of a church organ. And so so it's kind of amazing if you look at these next to each other. Just like the variety required to make all these different pitches.
That's amazing.
So yeah, this is a rank that's intended to sound kind of like a choir. Do you want to just play the box? It doesn't, but when you add it with other ranks, it gives...
Hit us with some Eric Whittaker.
So now add the VDO to that. So if you add strings to that, This is the room, watch your head, that people are sort of most surprised and blown away by, because this is where theater organs really depart from church organs. The point of a theater organ was to basically give you as much possibility musically to accompany a silent film. And so you're standing in the room where there are no pipes in here, it's just all percussion.
It seems like a huge effort to not have a band.
It does, but I think they were dealing with the same thing back then, of not having to rely on players every night. You could get
it's improvised as well, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Oftentimes. Although oftentimes reels would come with suggested themes, and then the great organist would sit down and know what to do with that. And it was great. But for a big investment up front, then you just had one person to worry about showing up. Yeah. And you can imagine this in 1928, it just blew people's minds to hear this in a theater, just exploding into the theater. And all of a sudden, silent films became this other thing. You know, it's incredible. Play the marimba. So you've got all these colors.
That's amazing.
And then they got really clever with their sound effects. This is a horse's hooves, so if you needed a horse chase when you were playing, you could do horse's hooves. So yeah.
Is that a thunder sheet?
No, it's good guess. It's a fire gong. Fire gong? Yeah, loud. Anyhow, so we're not wearing ear protection, so yeah.
Oh, those are ear protectors.
This is a really cool view up here. How incredibly elaborate it gets.
Wow.
This is a brass called a brass sax. Not supposed to sound like a saxophone as we know it, but a reed color. Brass trumpet. It's one of the only ranks I added. That's from the Oakland Paramount. And then you see, sort of again, like on the other side, you see these are chromatic chests, so the lowest pitches are at the back, highest at the front. Very rare. Usually most organs did this.
Yeah.
So, but there's a lot of power in this room, so sonically.
So it may sound incredibly crass. So what was, in kind of modern terms, a theatre investing in something like that? What would that
cost?
Yeah.
I mean, I think these organs, I've heard for the biggest organs, again, this is in 1920s money, very expensive, $30,000, $40,000.
In 1920s money?
Yeah, huge amount of money. Yeah, absolutely. So, but basically everything I've just shown you, Wurlitzer was capable of sending one of those out to a theater in a boxcar every day. They could build one of these. So that's how in demand they were. Every silent theater wanted to be able to put on their marquee featuring Mighty Wurlitzer. And oftentimes the organist was billed above the picture. Yeah. So it was Jesse Crawford plays, and then the title of the movie below that.
You must feel so attached to the history of cinema.
I do.
And that's not something I see that often in Hollywood.
No, I think it's not, and it's like...
It's such an amazing heritage.
It's
just like a rich cultural...
Absolutely, and it's such an important part to... I think it's so important to know where we came from as musicians and composers if we're getting into this tradition.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this has been a really brilliant trip to LA. For me, it's... we're a sorority and a fraternity, and there's always the similarities and all that. But where the industries are concerned, there is nuanced differences between the different territories that I visit and stuff. But something I'm observing both in Britain and I believe over here is this massive transformation of the importance of TV. Mm-hmm. For me, when I believe we're similar ages, mm-hmm. when I was growing up, it was like usually the route, certainly in Britain, and I think Daniel Pemberton's a great example of that kind of classic route, is factual, and then a bit of TV, then indie movies, then big movies, and now he's scooped back into the big kind of mega TV. But that is changing, isn't it? Now
it definitely is. Like, I think storytelling, in the 90s, to be a television composer in the 80s or 90s, mm-hmm. without being disparaging about it, but it meant something very different than it does today, I think.
Yeah.
I think the time you had to push something out was really ridiculous. That can still be the case today, but mm-hmm. I think the storytelling is so good today.
Yeah.
As we know, I mean, and for me, like I love scoring films, but if you have a 8, 10, 12-hour film, basically, on that level, cinematically, directorially, story-wise, to then be a part of that as far as a composer goes, it's just, it's really exciting.
I mean, in Britain, we tend to make 6 in a season.
Right, okay, got it.
So it's a bit bigger here, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be, yeah. Like I'm doing 2 shows at Hulu right now. One is 10 episodes. One, I believe, is 8 episodes. They're going away. Security dogs. And then I'm doing a show for Ryan Murphy on Netflix, which is, I think, 7 episodes. So it's really changing how... I think people are just sort of... however long it takes to tell the story, they're telling the story like that. And in terms of, like, for Netflix, for Hulu, for all these, it's not as punishing as a network schedule. So it's...
Right.
I think especially in the beginning, there's a lot of time to explore. And it gets a little crunched at the end, but it really... It's more like a film in that way, in the sense that oftentimes you do have a good amount of time up front to really explore and figure it out before you get into the actual writing.
It feels to me, certainly coming to LA, that it is an exciting time. I had a walk, 100 odd people turned up, and I got the sense that even people who had been at it for maybe 2 or 3 years were getting work. There seems to be a lot of work out there, but the kind of money's been kind of spread a little bit thinner and stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have an opinion on that.
Yeah, I think the scary thing for all of us is, and there's a movement against this right now, is that there are companies approaching composers about getting rid of their writer's share and doing a buyout up front, as you know. And that is, I heard that the same conversation was had about publishing 40 years ago. Well, publishing is long gone from a composer's life, for the most part. And now the next battlefield is really these royalties. And so I've been a part of the movement, as other composers have, begging younger composers not to give those up, because there's... Of course, we all want to make a living up front, but the long-term implications of setting a precedent where that's no longer even in the cards for us is really dangerous. That's how people put their kids through college, buy houses, all that stuff. It's so important. And why are these companies coming after those? Because they look and go, hey, this is really lucrative. Let's take it.
Absolutely.
Let's give these composers X amount of dollars up front. It seems like a lot of money for those couple of shows that really take off and become something huge. You will make vastly more money than you ever would whatever they're giving you up front, and they know that. And so that's really
well, they can afford to. It's almost like a hedge fund, isn't it? They can afford to spread.
Exactly.
And they'll pick up a couple of those.
That's exactly
But you never know when that's going to happen for you. One of the first jobs I ever did was a terrible... Well, actually, it was quite successful in its time. It was a series called 2 Pints of Lager and a Packet of Crisps. And they made something like 120 episodes, which in Britain is a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a comedy drama series. And BBC Worldwide, the commercial wing of BBC, came and just basically said, we'd love to publish it. And so I gave up 50% of my publishing, and I've done some calculations just based on what I got, and had I just done a kind of self-published, or done a more of an admin deal for maybe 5-10%, or just published it myself through PRS, I think I lost probably in the region of £100,000 to £150,000, and this wasn't that much music,
right.
And it's just like you kind of go. It's almost like seeing all of these students take on all of this student debt, and it's like. That's like, don't buy that pizza, because you have to imagine that you're buying 8 of them with the interest.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing as like in the future, it's the future you who will come back in time and say,
yes, what were you thinking? Absolutely, no question.
Playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Do you not think it will get to a point where we simply have to get paid up front and we won't expect royalties in the future? And is that something we have to come to terms with, or is it something we have to fight?
I mean, I guess having come up through the change that's happening now, I would hope it's something we can fight for at least a little while.
Yeah.
Obviously, some of these streaming platforms, BMI, ASCAP, all these PROs are doing their best to sort of put deals in place that are at least comparable to cable and some of these other royalty streams. But and it's changing. It is changing. Like today, a minute of music on Netflix, on a good show is going to pay much better than it did, a couple of years ago.
Right.
So that's really good.
Because I guess the problem is that what they're doing is they're taking production budgets from that model and grafting it onto a model where there isn't actually the revenue stream at the other end.
Yeah, yeah, it is fascinating, and it's exciting to be a part of it. It's scary to be a part of it, and honestly, the other thing that is really interesting. I've been approached a couple times, I think, by the same company that's doing AI composition stuff.
Yeah,
and I just sort of I know why they're doing it. It seems counterintuitive to go to composers with a piece of software that writes music. They're doing it because they want to try and get composers to get behind it as a tool. But I don't. It's not a tool. They sort of emailed and said, "Hey, for ideas and stuff." And I said, "I will never touch this. Like I being a composer is about coming up with those ideas. I don't want help from software. Bless you and all that." But that's the scary thing with people who don't really care about music. They will just go rely on those pieces of software, and we're already seeing it for YouTube or wherever, and then they just and then that's a composer out of a job.
And I do see YouTube as a very important thing. Yeah. I don't think they've even gone halfway yet. I think where YouTube is going is because the algorithm will always win.
Right.
There are two problems for me. As a YouTube creator, I can see the absolute terror that other creators have about usage of music, and the fact that they get demonetized and stuff, or copyright strikes, which are a nightmare. Yeah, that kind of stuff. There's one issue. So it's creating a really rich marketplace for the royalty-free stuff, which isn't AI. It's written by composers, but it's also composers writing stuff by the pound.
Yes,
and the problem I have with that music is you kind of go, that's almost like an AI bot could write that because it's arpeggiator based.
It's a really good point. Absolutely, it's a really good point, and I think we just have to have faith that just as we consider ourselves artists who really care about what note goes where to what scene and what moment, there are directors who will continue to make stories like that, who will continue to be supported by studios who understand that there's always going to be a place for that.
And I think we can be pointing. I think that we can be confident that it will saturate, and when things saturate, there will be a reaction against it. And I'm seeing a lot of creators who are doorless jamming, Look Mum No Computer, all of that kind of stuff, and it's great seeing all of these wonderful relics, kind of bringing it out of the box, because AI can't define these super random things. I think I read a lovely essay about AI saying that the reason AI will fail as a music form is because AI can't determine what music is. So AI would never invent hip hop because the parameters of what music are being redefined through generations.
Absolutely, it's a really good point. Yeah, pushing whatever it is to the next phase. Yeah, that's gonna, I hope, always come through a human being and not anywhere else. Yeah. Brilliant. And back to like this space was sort of me doubling down on the idea that live music, live recording is still really important. We're having our own crisis in this town with being able to keep work here in town as far as the orchestras and musicians, and there's so many great musicians here. And so when I built this place, I put in the organ because obviously the history of it, I just love it and needed to be rescued. But at the same time, I also just, I'm maybe naively hopeful that there will be changes in the coming years that will start to bring a little bit of recording back to Los Angeles, because there's plenty, as we know, there's so much content out there. There's so much content out there, not as much as there was, but that still depends on live music, and there's still an opportunity for us to be working with orchestras every day in this town, every day in London. I mean, there is that much work.
Absolutely.
So
I don't know if you've heard, Angel Studios has just shut, which is our third.
Yeah.
It's the only other viable alternative to Abbey and Air.
And that's the scary thing. And in this town too, some of the giant stages they're all just teetering on being closed. And I worry like this place can accommodate 50 musicians. But I worry about the 100 musicians, the Eastwood Scoring Stage, or Sony or Fox. When those are gone, that's a lot harder to bring back into town again. Absolutely. The bigger stages
and all of the skills that surround all
it's
of
really
that.
scary.
It is really scary. Yeah. You mentioned that you really encourage younger composers not to take these kind of buyout deals. Are there any other kind of pieces of advice you would give to younger people wanting to kind of break into this very interesting new marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think just like I always like the idea of really working on finding a unique voice. I think everyone does have a unique voice. I think it's really easy to make a huge amount of money on top films, top TV shows, doing stuff that is nothing new. We see it happen all the time. But to really take the time to stick to, develop, and fight for your own voice, wherever that leads, is to me what is vastly more exciting than someone going, "Oh, can you do that composer?" Yeah, sure, yeah, I can do that. So I mean, I think there's a whole bunch of stuff in the middle that's it's completely adequate. It does what it needs to do, but it's not pushing boundaries. And I think if we as composers can really find that unique voice, we hopefully find our way to directors who have that unique voice too, and then that becomes something that differentiates itself from that.
I totally agree, and I have to say, I think that I state this a lot, as find your voice. But I don't underestimate that it's difficult.
Yes. Absolutely.
It's very, because there's something reassuring about sounding like someone else, because there's a point of measurement.
Yeah, it's true.
That's 95%.
It's true. Yeah.
But the problem is that you just will not stand out. And particularly to an untrained ear, once you've listened to 2 orchestral show reels, it just all sounds exactly the same.
One of the things that I was just talking to you about your Bernard Herrmann library, my hope is always, even if I'm using that library, that it's going to get replayed with live players. Yeah. As a tool, though, same as these instruments, like each one of those libraries is an instrument that can be inspiring. And I found that particularly with Bernard Herrmann library. And so just as I might pick up an instrument I don't know that well and write something new, if I sit down to something that sounds really different, I'll write differently, and that's exciting.
It's absolutely brilliant. One last question. We spoke about angry me going back in time and telling me not to give away the royalties. Yeah. Is there anything you could go back 10 years and tell you 10, 15 years and tell yourself?
That's a really good question. I feel like I've in committing to my voice that I have, like it has ultimately paid off. Mm-hmm. But I had an opportunity early on to continue to work within a larger group of composers, and I may have gotten to a bigger place earlier, but I would have neglected my unique voice, and so. I don't know if there's much I would go back and tell myself, other than just trust the process, trust that being yourself is going to end up paying off,
I think something that really helpful, that really, it was like a real click for me, is I interviewed Harry Gregson Williams. This is actually not very long ago, and he just said it's not a race. And it was like, what, I still, that's a real hang-up of mine, particularly in this age of social media.
Oh my God.
The number of Instagrams of people doing that's a 700-piece orchestra.
Yeah. And someone else, another really wonderful composer, recently gave me a piece of advice, which was so great. It was so simple. We were having dinner, and he said, "I learned years ago, don't ever look at someone else getting a project and go, that should have been mine." Yeah. And it is. That comes to me often, that it is so liberating just to sort of trust your own path, and whatever it is, whenever it is, And
you learn more from mistakes than you do from your success.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent stuff. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much,
Nathan.
It's a real pleasure. That's great.
Good.
It's a nice portrait, Lauren.
I look a bit grumpy.
Busy.
You always look really grumpy.
Accurate. It's true.
The dogs. That would be awesome.
Because you'll appreciate this, because I built this to keep people out of the control room.
Now there's a good idea.
So this is the kitchen and lounge.
That's the fun part. So Jesse's going to come to you and be like, Jen, you're going to tell him to go.
So you pipe in the session. You get a full view here, the orchestra.
Amazing.
You get your scene up there.
Great to see you guys. Yeah, absolutely. See you soon. Thanks so much for your help. It's great. And thanks for coming to the walk, man.
Yeah, of course.
Great
it's
stuff.
So fun. Next time you're in town.
Absolutely. See you later.
Good. You guys just like